You're what?
Took my Invisalign out, so I didn't know.
You're actually just recording. Okay. All right. I have to get in position. That was a far walk. All right. So today we are talking to my dear friend, Dr. Dave, who I've known forever, and his son, Stephen. And we've kind of been on the theme of just like family and love and all those types of things. And I thought it would be an interesting perspective because I went to Stephen's wedding a couple of years ago, and it was hands down, and I apologize to any other wedding I went to, but hands down, that was like the best wedding I have ever been to.
Thanks.
And it wasn't like the food and the flowers, although that was good too. But this overwhelming sense of community and love, I mean, it was like over the top. But what was different about your wedding is that you married a man.
I did.
Yeah. So we wanted to talk a little bit about that because, 15, 20 years ago, I never would have attended. I mean, I don't know if a wedding like that would have occurred.
It wouldn't have. I mean, I don't think society was ready for that, and I think therefore gay couples would not have been in a position to, and it wasn't legal. So what do you do? I mean, you're kind of caught. And thankfully times have changed. Society has changed, I think. And that includes me. I think, not that I was ever an opponent of gays, but, and I think I even said, I ended up doing a wedding speech, and I think I said...
Right, I was like ugly crying when I heard that.
In the wedding speech,
So was I.
I don't necessarily understand, but it doesn't matter. I think people are different. I'm white. Sorry. You're black. We're different.
We're different.
But here we sit, and if we can't find common ground and we can't figure out that love is okay, then there's something wrong with the world. And so I think after Stephen came out, we had two choices. Accept that that's who he is, or flee.
Well, I have to ask you, what was that conversation like when you finally, go to your dad and say...
At first it was terrifying.
Right.
I mean, it's point blank. It was, I was terrified. I put it off for as long as I possibly could.
But why?
And I was afraid that I was going to upset him, and everyone that I spoke to kept saying, he's not going to care. You have to just tell him. And when I came out and told him, he shook his head and gave a little smile and came around the counter and gave me a hug, and nothing ever changed.
But the funny part about that was that he was sitting with his two sisters.
Oh, this is fun.
Yeah.
And I'll let you tell the story.
So I said, Dad, I have something to tell you. And Chloe and Kelsey were sitting at the counter at the island with us, and Dad was standing across. And Dad kind of went, oh, okay. It's not often that, I start off with, Dad, there's something I need to tell you. It's just, come on and tell him. I said, Kelsey's pregnant. And she was just starting to date Scott at the time. So it broke the ice. And we all kind of, Kelsey screamed, and we all kind of laughed, and I said, no, actually, I'm gay. And then it was kind of like, whoa, oh. So I broke the ice with humor at first. And because I know that resonates with him. He's always a goofball, and he's always using humor to make tough times a little bit easier.
So was he one of the last ones you have told? I mean, did you kind of talk to your sisters and your mom?
The first person I did tell was Kelsey, my sister Kelsey, and Chloe about the same time. And then I was pushed to tell my mom by Kelsey. And I told Kelsey and Scott actually at the same time. And even, and I was a little worried about Scott even, he's... hadn't been around too long, and future brother-in-law, and I wasn't sure what he would think at first, and they, both kind of, as soon as I told me, they're like, oh, okay, we were at a bar, let's have another drink, and really went no further than that. And then I think the last people were my grandparents.
Was that tough?
That was very tough, just because of them being an older generation, still having very very strong opinion, conservative Catholics.
Right.
Very
I mean,
religious.
we are in Springfield, Illinois.
Yeah, they're very religious, you know, so that had.
But this could be any town.
Right, but just very conservative,
Yeah,
Republican, Catholic.
Yeah.
So that was just as tough, I
Mhm.
think, than to tell.
I sat next to them at the wedding, and they were so proud.
Oh, yeah. You know, and they love Nick, my husband, and I mean, we talked on the way over here. My grandma and Nick get along better than
Right.
just about anyone else because they just sit there and bicker to each other about everything else that's going on in the world, and it's a great little.
Well, I remember when your dad told me, I thought to myself, oh my God, I've been trying to set him up, trying to find a nice, cute woman. And I even used to say, man, if I was 20 years younger, I'd date Steven. And I remember you told me, I'm like, if I was 20 years younger and a man, I'd date Steven. Like, it didn't change, like, how wonderful I thought you were. But, I mean, there had to be a few people that maybe you decided not to invite to the wedding, or maybe you invited and they didn't come because of that, or?
You know,
Actually, there were.
there were family friends.
Yeah. And you know, I can't remember if it was a note that we got or a phone call.
It was a letter that Christmas.
Yeah, just saying, you know, sorry we can't. And I don't know exactly how it was worded,
Sure.
but ideally, you know, we don't agree with that, and you know, and that hurt a lot because of who they were. It's actually my best friend growing up, family, and again, I'm not gonna judge.
Sure, everybody
for
has their
views.
own views.
But the thing that I keep coming back to is that so I'm going to make this story longer than it needs to be, but when I was in high school, there was a young man that we hung out with who ended up being gay. He was everybody's friend. I don't remember I think he had some girlfriends here and there. He was a little bit different, but nothing flamboyant or anything like that. And after I heard he was gay, it didn't bother me. At the time, I think in high school, if he would have told me, I would have thought, well, that's really strange. I wouldn't have known how to deal with it. But you know who really helped me deal with all this? Can we mention names on these kind of podcasts?
You can do whatever you want.
A former nurse at our building.
Really? Oh, yes, my nurse. He actually watches those. That's fine. Tom?
Yeah.
Love Tom.
And not other than to,
Right.
I mean, he's just so open, just wonderful human being. And just, as far as questions, I think one time I said something about, I asked him a question related to gayness, and in Tom's way, straightforward, but funny. We laughed, but I was curious, and he was not
offended.
Yeah, I mean, he knew how to take it, and to this day, I love that guy, and I realized then that people are people, and the other thing that I realized from Tom was that it's not a choice.
Exactly.
And so for people to say they don't agree, you don't get to agree or disagree, it is. And people who are gay don't have a choice. And if I can say this, I know he struggled for a long time, and we talked about when he might have actually kind of thought that he was gay. And it stretches back a long, long time. So for him to have to deal with that alone and go through low periods that I know he went through, all because of the worry and the concern and how society is, who would choose that?
Right.
Cool. And I think that was tough too, coming out to you, was that I didn't want you to think that you failed in some way because you made me the way that I am, because it was no one's fault or anyone's choice. It was how I was born.
That's interesting.
So anyway, that's what I think. If I could get one thing across in this podcast is that we do judge, and in some sense that's probably okay initially, because from a safety perspective, if I'm not a little judgmental and I'm not a little bit on edge, maybe something I can't get myself out of a dangerous situation. But after that instant judgment,
and we're human.
Yeah.
I mean, I can be judging.
And I'm talking about global, not
No,
just
me.
Right.
And it's not like we're trying to be.
Yeah, I'm just talking about the am I a little careful on the subway? Am I a little careful, But from a humanistic standpoint, people are people, and I don't care if somebody has, red hair or dark skin. If I don't give them a chance and try to at least be civil, what am I doing here?
So how does that, is there a grieving process, like as a parent? And when I say grieving, I mean, you have these thoughts about, I want my son to grow up and marry a nice woman and have babies, and this is my perspective. Was there?
And to jump in real quick, I don't know if that necessarily was a grieving. I think it was a lot more of, you had a lot of questions about, okay, how is his life going to be? Because it's going to be tough for him. He's going to get looks when he's holding hands with his husband walking down the road. There's, he's going to get judged.
Or are there people that are going to lash out? I mean, the day and age that we are now,
Is he going to be safe?
Yeah.
Exactly.
So I think it was more that, more than mourning.
Yeah.
I think he had a lot of questions. And going back to that, questions as well, I would, he's asked a ton of questions. I mean, we've sat down and we've had conversations, and he's asked, questions, and I love that. I want him to be educated on the subject and educated on, if he has a patient. I hope that helps his patients. That, he can say.
Which is funny because I think I told you this story. I don't know if I told you this. I once had a patient who came in for a first visit and basically asked me point blank, "Are you okay taking care of a gay man?" And I said, "As long as you're okay having a straight doctor." And
right.
from there, it was fine. So
Well, and two, you have to be, like you said, to be very non-judgmental. When I have a patient, I'll say, "Oh, are you sexually active, man or woman?" I really don't care. I just need to know which one, so we can,
that brings up a set of
have that
issues
right.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
it's not always that assumption. So what about family? I mean, is there? I mean, because have you guys thought about what is that process going to be? I mean, because you're going to be an awesome dad. Awesome.
we hope.
Yeah. I mean, I've learned a lot from
I mean,
him.
that's
So.
not hope you're awesome. We hope that you get a chance to be.
Right.
We've definitely talked about it. It's definitely something that we want to pursue.
But there are different ways to go about it.
There are, and we have not dove into
Right.
the process yet.
Right.
But eventually we will plan on probably adoption.
And you guys would both be fantastic.
Yeah. And it's very expensive. It's
Like we talked about.
The process
I mean, it's
is very.
That's why I was hoping I won the lottery.
Well, I was going to say, because the people we've
I was
talked
hoping you won the lottery
to.
too.
I mean,
But
just
just the entire process is very difficult. So at this point, I mean, I'm not as young as I could be to, as some fathers, but my husband's quite a bit younger than I am, and we're just at that point right now where we're trying to figure out when the best time would be to have that.
Because there are old people.
That's not something that we're worried about. It's just something that we're not, at the point where it's,
Right.
where the
Where
crossroads
the good-
are,
right. You do have to be young enough to be able to do it in a way. No, I know.
I know
I know
somebody
what
who's
you mean.
52 who has a baby.
You're right. I know.
What I mean, I'm not
No, I get you.
Can
Just the
have-
energy.
and it's-
Yeah.
And I mean, it's ideally.
and I don't want to be,
Yeah.
completely inactive by the time,
Well,
by
the
the
other
time
thing
they're
is
10 years old.
Yeah, that's the thing that I look at that as a young grandfather, and for you, you're still young enough that, should you have a child and that child end up having children, you'll still be young enough to be active.
And just a whole new time. And I actually have a couple. I'm hoping that we do an interview with them. Two ladies who actually have two sons, and she was the biological carrier of the children.
Oh, okay.
And a little different time, little different acceptance. I was watching college football and I saw a Jared ring commercial, and it was atypical couples. A woman asking a man to marry him, two men, one was proposing. I mean, just things that you and I just
Wouldn't have seen in our childhood.
never would have seen. Well, heck, nowadays just to see African American with a white man in a relationship,
And
never would have seen that
for
when
me,
we were
and
up.
nobody cared.
Right,
That's an awesome
right,
thing.
right.
Yeah.
Nobody cares. So a whole different
Yeah.
a whole different time. So very, very interesting. So what is your, I mean, as you look back, and I don't like to say would you do things differently, because I hate that question, because you always do the best you can on that day. But if you had that advice to somebody who is struggling with telling their family or coping with,
I've had people. I was just gonna say every situation is different. And I've had people, come to me and they're like, "How should we approach this? Because we think our son might be gay."
Right.
You can't.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to wait for that person to tell you.
I think if I'm being, in full disclosure, I think we asked you prior to you coming out.
I think you may have kind of
hinted at it or asked,
tiptoed around the.
But
I think there were some people that were very surprised, and I think there were some people that kind of had an idea.
Like,
yeah. But what was the initial question though before?
Just
if I would do anything different.
Yeah.
I don't think so. I think that I may, obviously hindsight's 20/20. Looking back, I mean, I would have told Dad earlier, because now looking back, that he didn't have any issue with it would have made my anxiety and stress for the whole process much different. Having his support early on, and I knew
come out to family earlier than you would have come out socially at different times.
I may have.
I mean, and the reason I bring that up is I think that's something that people should consider. Is just because your family knows doesn't mean necessarily that you're ready for the world to know, and that's an okay thing.
Because
I think
relationships change,
and you do need that support system. It is a huge stress, of carrying that around and not being able to tell anyone who you really are.
I couldn't imagine.
So I think that telling my family earlier, even if it was just Kelsey or one person,
somebody to confide in,
a person,
What was it like for you when you tell people? Because obviously you're very proud of Stephen and his accomplishments. Did you ever have that hesitance of, so my son's getting married? Did you feel like you had to explain, but he's marrying me? Did you ever have that? You know what I mean? Where you kind of had to toss it out there.
I think from society, I'm going to be completely honest. I'm still a little bit like that, because you don't know how people are going to respond. And it's, I'm talking about somebody who, I love to death. And for me to see a response that might indicate that somebody would think differently about him, it's gut-wrenching. But by the same token, I've also come to the place in my life where I realize, what? If you don't like it, if you don't agree, I don't necessarily need you. And if you want to come around, and it sounds goofy, but if you want to be on our team, awesome. We'd love to have you. If not, that's fine, but I don't need you.
You're not going to fret about it.
Anymore. I mean, I used to, 10 years ago, if you'd asked me that, I would have been, I don't know if I want people to know, and these guys have, to their credit, Nick and Stephen have jobs. Their employers know that they're gay. This isn't a time when they have to hide that, and they're both extremely successful at what they do, and they're good, and they're good human beings.
Oh my God, you guys are so much fun.
Yeah, I mean, how do
I mean, you really are. I mean,
And the other thing I said at the wedding, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Because your letter was off the charts.
If him being not gay would mean that he's not the Stephen that he is, I don't want that.
You don't want it. No, I agree.
So, you deal with what comes your way in life, and this is one of those things that I think it is genetic. We've kind of laughed a little bit that, I think there are, gay people back on both sides of the family tree.
Well, and you didn't talk about it, but you always hear those stories about, Aunt Edna never married, and she had lots of kids.
And she did marry.
Right. Okay. All right. Right.
And so and so had a very good friend.
Right. Right. Well,
and Uncle Mervyn.
Well, I grew up with my cousin who had a good friend, and they were best friends, and they lived together. And when I was young, I just thought that would be so awesome to live with my best friend all the time. And then as I got older, I was like, oh, now I get it.
Ding.
Yeah, and I'm like, I would have been okay as a kid, but I get it was just a different time. But yeah, kudos to you, because not a lot of parents have that level of
And I still hear about that too.
unconditional love. I mean, and you know, we see those families in clinic
Yeah.
where people are disowned.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to talk
All
to
the
you.
time.
I don't want to have any part of that.
And it's just sad because I know a lot of people who are in that situation who are wonderful people,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, for them not to be able to experience that family love for all of the things that you go through during the time you have on this earth is just.
Or all the other things you could be, you know? I mean, there's murderers, there's liars.
Exactly.
There's,
And,
right.
God,
You know,
and,
I just,
you know, yeah, and
if you can be a
or,
kind
or,
human.
as much as I hate to say, you know, a child with a chronic disease, you know, there are all kinds of people who don't get the love that they deserve because of something they can't control.
Right. That's a good way to put it.
So, and I think all of your, you know, the podcasts that you do, the underlying theme, and we just talked about this a little bit before, because you didn't want anybody to know that you might be drinking. We were talking about
Good old fashioned.
I don't think that-
Good old fashioned, by the way.
unconditional love.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that adoption. I mean, you have to have unconditional love. You want to start a family, but you're taking in, you know, a stranger,
Right,
but
right.
you don't care. Somebody who might try to save somebody else's life and get injured.
Addiction.
Addiction.
That couple, that unconditional.
Yeah.
Road
You
to
know,
recovery.
donating a kidney. You know, giving a
Well, there's good people in this world. I mean, that's what this is about. Is
But-
there are really good
So
people
why
in
can't we
this
put
world?
down our guard
Yeah.
and all, you know, show our goodness? Why does it have to be you against me? And we talked about how, again, you know, the whole color thing. I don't see it. I was lucky enough to be exposed to color growing up that it didn't matter. I mean, these are the guys that I played sports with. These are the girls that, you know, we kidded around with. You know.
And that a lot is the way you were raised. And then, you know, and a lot of people don't have exposure to certain things, so they're afraid of it. Like, I love when, because, you know, we went to med school together and we would drive back and forth. And then your daughter is about the same age as my daughter. And when they were little, when we would kind of hang out, she thought Rosa was her black sister. I'm like, yeah, right? Everybody should have a black sister. Everybody should have a white sister. We're all sisters, you know? So, I mean,
Even me.
yeah.
My sister.
Well, you're my work husband and I'm your work wife, so I think we've got that figured out. But no, this is a beautiful story. So I appreciate you guys sharing it because I think we're at a better place where we can have these conversations, and you don't need to feel ashamed.
No,
of
and
them.
I really hope that society continues to grow. I mean, I think there are a lot more people who are open to the fact that hey, it is what it is. Again, like I said before, I can't say, you know, that I understand it because I've not been there. But
And you probably
I
don't
accept
understand me as a black woman
yeah,
because
I've
you've never
there.
been a black
No.
woman,
You know,
and I can't understand a white man because I've never been a white man. Thank you, sweet baby Jesus, but but you're right. It's hard for us to understand, you know, being in your shoes as much as
Absolutely. Everyone's story is different no matter what. And I mean,
And it's our job to help make everybody's story a good one. Really. You know, whether
Gotta
it's
let your
family,
soul
whether it's
shine.
friends, and you know, people that we touch, whether it's socially, whether it's from a work perspective. And I tell people all the time that I think the older I get, the more I realize that this life that I have is not about me. It's about how I touch other lives and how, you know, can I, and not forcefully, not that it's like every day I wake up and, oh, whose life can I change? No, but can I try to be the best me that I can be so that I
and taking those
transform somebody else.
opportunities that you're presented and like, oh, I think this is an opportunity where I can do
Yeah,
something.
talk about my experience or talk about, you know, some knowledge that I have. And I know you do it every day and you're fantastic at it. And, you know,
Thank you.
no, truthfully. And I think, you know me well enough that I wouldn't just say that off the cuff. But, you know, I have not had that much to drink.
Right, we just started, so we're not. Yeah. Well, awesome, Stephen. I'm like I said, I'm so proud of you, and you know, you've been married 2 years, and marriage isn't easy, no matter who you are, what you are, where you come from. But you know, definitely a little different to step out nowadays in this society. You know, I think about the first interracial couple, you know, where in their there's a great movie on that, you know, the Lovings, where it was illegal for a white man to marry a black woman, and at one point it was illegal for you to marry your husband. So I mean, we're
Not too long
definitely
ago,
right
for
just-
either one.
right. So I mean, things are changing for the good. We're making progress. So
Keep
people,
going that way.
like, I mean, your family, your story, and the way you are and carry yourself, I mean, it definitely helps, I think. So I appreciate that.
You are very welcome.
All right.
Absolutely.
Thank you for having us.
Let's
Cheers again.
Drink some more and turn off the camera.
All right.
Sweet.